Welcome to NWR Virtual Health Conference, May 2020. On the line, we have Mark Diamond, and Mark Diamond is involved with Antisense Therapeutics, a Melbourne-based biopharmaceutical company, developing and commercializing antisense pharmaceuticals for large unmet markets. The products are in license from Ionis Pharmaceuticals, which is listed on the NASDAQ under IONS, world leaders in antisense drug development and commercialization. Antisense has an advanced stage product pipeline with positive phase 2 clinical results delivered from 2 compounds targeting Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy, Mark will say that properly, and Acromegaly. Mark Diamond, of course, has over 30 years experience in the pharmaceutical and biotechnology industry. Before joining Antisense, he was employed in the US as a director, project planning business development at Folding Pharmaceuticals. Over to you, Mark. We can't wait to hear from you.
No, thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to present today. With the current pandemic conditions restricting opportunities to present at investor conferences, it's a tremendous occasion for us to be able to update on Antisense Therapeutics, particularly ahead of the reporting of our final results from our AT1102 phase 2 clinical trial in Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, and that data is imminent. So, great that we have this opportunity to overview the key features of that program ahead of the reporting of the data, but also to go through the key value drivers and catalysts for the business overall. So, in my presentation, there will be forward-looking statements, so they should be treated as at-risk statements. This slide here overviews the corporate structure of the company. A market cap presently of around 23.5 million, and cash as at the 31st of March, 5.4 million. So that gives us effectively an enterprise value of around 18.5 million. Interestingly, Ian Wilkie, analyst at Morgans, recently prepared a desk note on Antisense Therapeutics. It's available on our website, and he compared the enterprise value of Antisense to other companies that were at a similar stage of clinical development. And in his analysis, he identified those companies had market caps, enterprise values in excess of 170 million compared to our 18 million. So we see it as a tremendous opportunity, to develop and grow the company aggressively based on successful continued clinical development of our programs. In December of last year, we successfully completed a capital raising of 5.5 million. That was the exercise of listed options, and so the timing of that capital raising now looks to be very prudent in light of the effect of the pandemic on the market. And so, we've significantly improved our balance sheet, and that allows us to undertake the activities that I'm going to be reporting on today. Those that follow the company know, and as per the introduction, key focus of Antisense Therapeutics is to advance our pipeline of antisense compounds. With 2 drugs, AT1102 and AT1103. Both of these compounds have been through successful phase 2 clinical trials in their respective disease indications, and the results from those studies have been published in peer-reviewed, high-quality scientific journals. The current development focus, though, as highlighted in the introduction, is advancing our drug AT1102 in the disease Duchenne's Muscular Dystrophy, which is a genetic wasting disease of boys, and I'll go into that in more detail in my presentation. However, we've been running a phase 2 clinical trial at the Royal Children's Hospital here in Melbourne, and in December we reported positive results from that study following the completion of dosing in all patients within the trial, and highlighting that the drug was well tolerated, showing an excellent safety profile, but also very, very encouraging data around the drug's effects on disease progression. We have now our final results from that study to report. We've advised the market that we're expecting to also present on the effects of the drug on some additional disease endpoints. And so that release of that data is imminent. Again, very pleasing to be able to talk to the features of the program ahead of that, ahead of the release of that data. So Antisense Therapeutics, essentially small pieces of DNA or RNA that have been modified with to make them more like medicines, in that these technology changes to the DNA and RNA allow these molecules to be designed very specifically for blocking the production of disease-causing proteins. So these antisense drugs are very specific for their target and therefore very potent in blocking the production of these disease-causing proteins. Unlike a traditional therapy where the drugs are designed to inhibit these disease-causing proteins after they've actually been produced, antisense drugs are working a step earlier to shut off the production of the disease-causing protein. So it's a unique platform technology. We've acquired these drugs from the biggest player in this space, the NASDAQ-listed company, Ionis Pharmaceuticals, a market cap of $9 billion, 30 of these antisense drugs in clinical development, 3 of them been approved by regulatory authorities in the US and Europe. So we're working with a well-characterized, mature technology. Very fortunate to have the partnership that we do with Ionis. So, and we're looking to build on that with additional clinical success with our own programs. So just turning then specifically to Duchenne's, as it is our lead program, as highlighted earlier, it is a devastating muscular disease. It's caused by the loss of a key protein for muscle function that these boys who have a genetic mutation of the gene are unable to make. And so it is a progressive muscle wasting disease. The loss of this dystrophin from the muscles has the boys usually losing the strength in their lower body initially. By around 10 to 12 years of age, the boys become wheelchair bound. Unfortunately, the disease is 100% fatal, and most boys don't survive beyond their mid-20s, lucky to get into the 3rd decade of their life. So the major driver of this muscle loss and wastage is the inflammation associated with the dystrophin reduction. There's about 44,000 boys in the Northern Hemisphere, so it's the US and Europe, that have the disease. So it's actually quite a common orphan or rare disease. It's actually the most common fatal disease, unfortunately. There aren't, unfortunately, there are very, very few therapeutics that are shown to be effective in this disease area. With respect to treating the inflammation, there is only one approach that's available for physicians, and that is the use of corticosteroids. Corticosteroids aren't particularly effective in treating the disease, but they do slow the loss of muscle do slow the muscle loss in the boys, and in fact they prolong significantly the period that the boys remain ambulant, so out of wheelchairs. But the problem with the corticosteroids is when they're dosed at the high levels that they need to be dosed at in this disease over a chronic period, the lifetime of these boys, there's some very nasty side effects, including significant weight gain, reduced bone density leading to osteoporosis, growth retardation. So, you know, that they are a therapeutic class where there needs to be significant improvement on to be able to address these very severe side effects. And that really is the focus of Antisense Therapeutics, is to look to develop up a therapeutic approach that's superior to the use of these corticosteroids. So this slide that I've got up here talks to why we move forward with AT1102 in Duchenne's. The first driver really was just as I highlighted, that there is a desperate need for better therapies for treating these boys, particularly the boys that are more advanced with the disease, that is, that have lost the ability to walk and have become wheelchair bound, because those boys really only have the steroids to be able to slow the disease progression. The other key driver of us moving into Duchenne's was that the target of our antisense drug is a receptor called CD49D. And CD49D is a receptor on the surface of white blood cells. And what was noted is that boys that have Duchenne's, particularly those boys where they're seeing a more rapid and severe progress with the disease, they have a lot more of these white blood cells that have high levels of the target of our drug. So these boys have lots of CD49D on their cell surface. So with our antisense drug, we're looking to reduce down, block the production of that CD49D from these white blood cells. And in fact, we are the only company globally that has a program targeting CD49D for Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. So we are unique in not only being the sole company developing a drug to the target, but unique in the mechanism of action is completely different to the way in which the corticosteroids work. So we're seeing an opportunity with our drug to be able to use it in combination with the steroids to improve on the activity of the steroids. The other important driver for us to move into Duchenne's was the fact that we'd already shown AT1102 to have positive effects on inflammatory processes from the work that we'd undertaken on AT1102 in multiple sclerosis, where in MS patients, we significantly reduced the number of inflammatory brain lesions in these MS patients compared to placebo. So we know there was desperate need for better therapies, and corticosteroids were first approved nearly 60 years ago. We know the target was very exciting as a potential disease modifier, and we knew our drug was working, at least in MS, to reduce inflammation. So we moved forward with a phase 2 clinical trial running at the Royal Children's Hospital in Melbourne. We're dosing non-ambulant boys for 6 months with this therapy. We are one of the few companies, again, in the world that's actually running clinical trials in this patient population. And boys that are wheelchair bound with the disease actually represent about half the boys that have Duchenne. So it's a very large percentage of boys that are in this position where they have effectively no other treatment alternative than the corticosteroids. So the study, as its primary endpoint, was looking at the safety and tolerability, as you do with phase 2 clinical trials. As the first condition that you want to be able to satisfy with respect to the study, is it safe? But we were also looking at the drug's effects on disease processes and progression. And particularly, we wanted to see what the drug was doing to the boys' upper limb functional capacity. That's assessed through some standard measurements around the boys' grip and pinch strength, and then the upper limb mobility is assessed by a technique called pull 2. So we reported the data following completion of dosing in December of this year. All 9 boys tolerated the therapy. We had no patients that withdraw from the study, and we were very pleased to report the excellent safety profile of the drug, but also very importantly, its effects on the disease progression in these boys. And this chart that I've got here is highlighting the drug's effects as noted in the MyGrip and MyPinch assessments. And we're comparing the data here to published literature on non-ambulant boys who were on high doses of steroids. And this data is essentially showing that in the same population as we assessed, where we saw no loss and in fact improvements on the grip strength compared to significant losses in the literature of the muscle strength in these non-ambulant boys. And that's the expectation, you know, in boys, even when they're on their steroids, that they're going to lose their strength over an extended period of time. But we are one of the very first to show, in fact, maintenance and potential improvement with the use of our drug. And that's what's got us very, very excited about our therapy. Along with the activity data, we were able to report that the drug reduced the number of lymphocytes that were in the blood of these patients, so supporting its mechanism of action of modulating T cells and those expressing CD49D in the blood. The Pool 2 data, it showed that basically 7 of the 9 participants benefited from the therapy over that short duration of treatment. And you'll see the quote here from Professor Thomas Voigt, who's a key opinion leader, expert in Duchenne's, talking about how encouraging this data was, and that it really did support moving forward with the next clinical study of this drug, which we're well advanced on, and I'll go into detail on that in my next slide here. But as I said, we've got new trial data pending on additional disease progression. We are working through the final analysis. We were anticipating that we would be out with the results around about this time. We're very close to being able to report on that data, and we are very keen to get that data in the market and to talk to the broader data that we have generated on the drug. This slide just goes into a little bit of detail on the phase 2B clinical trial planning. We've had meetings with 3 European regulatory authorities, national regulatory authorities. We're looking at running the study in Europe. You'll see here on the slide that we got great support from these national regulatory authorities for dosing boys for 1 year and at higher doses, giving us the capacity to push the dose higher in these boys. And the regulatory agencies gave us great encouragement that if we run a study for a year, when we're looking at the endpoints such as Pool 2 and MySet, where we've already shown benefits in our proof of concept study that we're running here at the Royal Children's Hospital, already showing the drugs having positive effects at 6 months. If we could show the same type of benefits over 12 months, then we could anticipate that being the path for an approval, an early approval for the trial. So the next step for us is to look to get the same advice from the European Medicines Agency. We've been working on our submission package. That's due to be submitted very soon. And following that, we'll get the European Reg advice to prepare our clinical trial application. We have started a process of engaging with the Food and Drug Administration. In February, we made a very important announcement of the appointment of a medical director, consultant medical director based in the US, a chap called Gil Price, and I encourage you to get on if you haven't seen that news to have a look at Gil Price's experience and record. And so we've got Gil not only engaging with the regulatory authority, but importantly working with key opinion leaders and the DMD advocacy groups in the US to set the path for us for clinical development plans in the US. Slide here talks to the market considerations for AT1102. When we contemplate the potential of 1102, we have to look beyond just the drug's potential for treating Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, because essentially the drug is poised to have a very positive effect on inflammation more generally. And so, for instance, the corticosteroids, market for corticosteroids is approaching $20 billion, and they are used in a very wide range of diseases. So we see an opportunity to be able to use our drug similarly not only in Duchenne's, but also in the types of indications where the corticosteroids are being used. And the general anti-inflammatory market is, identified here. That's a massive market, over 100 billion. So, in the Duchenne's market, we know in the US where there's about 20,000 boys with Duchenne's, they're pricing new therapies between $100,000 to $500,000 annually for these patients. So that equates to just in the US alone, a $2 billion market. And so, that's, where we're focused initially, but we see much, greater opportunity to add value. And so our shareholders should be very excited, I believe, about the potential value of AT1102 as a treatment for inflammation or inflammatory disease. Similarly, those that follow the company would know of the relevance of the company Sarepta Therapeutics. They are, of course, first company to have approval for a drug to look to restore dystrophin levels in a small percentage of boys, around 13% that had a particular mutation of their dystrophin gene. While it's limited to that small percentage of patients and only being used in the US, they are now approaching annual sales in the US of around $500 million annual, so $500 million selling product. What my shareholders may not be aware of is that very recently Sarepta licensed out one of their drugs for Duchenne's that was in an early stage of development in their pipeline, a gene therapy, to Roche for EU rights only, where Roche paid Sarepta $1.15 billion US upfront, with another $1.7 billion in milestones plus royalties on sales. So this was a huge deal done just for European rights, which, as I said, is the first market we would be hoping for an accelerated approval. I had highlighted earlier the appointment of Dr. Gil Price as a consultant medical director. He joins Bill Goolsbee as the second non-executive director of Sarepta to join our group. And so we think that's great affirmation to have Bill and Gil both, associated with the company, getting their validation for being involved, but also us being able to leverage off their tremendous experience and contacts in the world of Duchenne's. We have, as I said previously, tested AT1102 in multiple sclerosis. We showed very significant reduction in brain lesions in the patients treated with AT1102 versus placebo. We have approval in the US to run a phase 2B clinical trial in patients with relapsing, remitting and relapsing secondary progressive MS at the dose of 25 milligrams per week for 6 months. So that's the same dose that we tested here at the Royal Children's Hospital, where we showed, we have shown great effects of the drug on disease progression. So we're now looking at the prospect of moving forward at that same dose in a clinical trial in patients with multiple sclerosis. So we've been consulting with key opinion leaders about what would be the best study for us to anticipate. We're also been re-engaging with pharmaceutical companies that are active in this MS space and talking about prospects of partnering the ongoing development in multiple sclerosis. Again, beyond multiple sclerosis, we see AT1102 as having, great potential in other inflammatory disease settings. There are multiple opportunities for us to contemplate, as I highlighted earlier. Corticosteroids, if you have a look at the number of disease indications that they're used in, it almost enters into the realm of 100 different applications. So the challenge for the board at the moment is to look to prioritise and focus our resources on the best fit for Antisense Therapeutics to move these programs forward. First step for us is to ensure that we've got the appropriate intellectual property and protection in place before we disclose on those indications. That's what we've been spending a lot of time on diligently. we're very, very keen to look to embellish our pipeline by bringing on one of these new disease indications, and we're looking forward to report on the progress there, which we expect to update on shortly. This slide then highlights the board of Antisense Therapeutics with very stable, well-experienced board. It's really biased by the executives from CSL, of course, the biggest company in Australia, let alone biggest pharmaceutical business in the land. And so, we're very lucky to have both Bob and Graham Mitchell on our board. But we've also got our two US-based directors, Gary Pace and Bill Goolsby, who really round out, what is a very experienced and well-credentialed drug development team. So finally, just then summarising the key value drivers for Antisense Therapeutics. We have two drugs that have shown excellent clinical trial results and have the validation of that data being published in high-quality scientific journals. DMD is the current clinical focus of the company. We've made great strides in moving that program forward into phase 2B. We're looking forward to very shortly updating on our interactions with the European Medicines Agency, and most importantly, though, to highlighting the data that we've now collating and analysing on the additional endpoints for that we've been monitoring for the boys out of our study at the Royal Children's Hospital. So again, that data is coming through very soon. We've got the multiple sclerosis opportunity and the new indications to follow up. So lots of potential news flow beyond what we're presenting in Duchenne's, and haven't gone into it here just given the time constraints, but of course we have our drug H1103 where there is partnering interest, and we're looking forward to opportunity to talk about successful progress around the out-licensing of H1103, again, for its continued development. Next step for that program would be a potential pivotal or registration study. So I'll pause there and we'll open up for questions.
Thank you so much, Mark. We have a few questions for you. Antisense, obviously, like all companies, you have limited funds and time to be able to actually deliver on all of the stuff you're planning to. And obviously, ATL1102, there's many different indications that you have pointed out that it could work for. So what's the plan? What does the timeline look like for these? Say with the MS work you're doing, you'd obviously want to get your patents right first before you progress too far down the track with the actual development. But what are we looking at here?
Sure. So with multiple sclerosis, we are, as highlighted earlier, we're speaking to key opinion leaders in the US about the type of clinical trial that we might look to undertake. With respect to how we might look to finance moving that program forward, there's two opportunities to do that we believe off our balance sheet. One is the opportunity to look for non-dilutive grant funding, and the other one is also the prospect of having a pharmaceutical partner fund the ongoing development of the drug. So that's the sort of focus at the moment. Current cash reserves being directed to Duchenne's, as you correctly highlighted, that is our priority. But for the other indications, with respect to MS, further clinical work either coming through non-dilutive mechanisms or partnering financing. The other indications, first step, again, is to get the appropriate IP in place. One strategy that we are well advanced on is looking at the opportunity to add value to those programs by undertaking animal studies in inflammatory disease models of interest to us. So, the conduct of animal studies, they can be done relatively quickly and economically. So there's opportunity for us and to fund those. We have the capital to be able to do those type of studies, which does two things. It It shores up the activity of the drug in that particular disease setting, adds further to the IP. Many deals have been struck with pharma companies with very attractive deals done on high quality animal data. So that's one of the ways that we're thinking of moving forward those new indications. We know that our shareholders are keen, as you've highlighted, to know kind of what's happening, next steps there, and we're working diligently to come forward with our plans there. But hopefully shareholders will appreciate the time that we're taking here, is because we really want to address the points that have been raised there. What is the best way for us to use our resources to add value to this drug and to the pipeline of Antisense Therapeutics?
Mm-hmm. What was the decision made on previous projects like ATL 1101, and why was it cancelled? I'm assuming it might be because the market opportunity for Duchenne's, but if you could just provide a bit of thinking around that for us.
Sure. So that the company's been in existence for some time, and so we've had sort of multiple programs that we're working on, and with the drug ATL 1101. We were developing that drug as a psoriasis treatment. We actually generated positive clinical data, but much as you highlighted, the data that we generated we thought was not clinically competitive with existing therapies. We didn't think the program justified continued clinical development, so we switched our focus over to other programs like ATL 1103 for acromegaly and multiple sclerosis. So with respect to Duchenne's, that's an opportunity really that it didn't present to us until probably 2 years ago now. And, we, unlike say in psoriasis rather, where the data look uncompetitive at the moment, the data in Duchenne's just looks outstanding, and there's no other way to really describe the data. Early data, we recognise that, but you think in a disease like Duchenne's, there is effectively no competition, because the competition are the corticosteroids, where we're already showing data that's superior to using corticosteroids alone, and we know our safety profile, even at this early stage, is looking so much superior to it. So Duchenne's is like the other end of the spectrum when compared to say ATL 1101 for psoriasis, and that's the way the company contemplates program. That's the way I think good drug development needs to be focused. If programs don't look like they're stacking up, you need to cut them quickly and move the focus onto assets that are going to return value.
Mm-hmm. And just on that note, thinking about what might be to come in the future, is the final data, do you think, likely to show any further potential or enhanced prospects for indications outside of Duchenne's or MS? Like, is there anything else that might come up on the radar at this stage in the process? Because I understand you're pretty far along in the process, as you pointed out, even at the start of the presentation, with Morgan's comparing where you are now compared to other companies, how far they are in their trials and where their market cap is compared to yours. So,
I think it's very possible that when we report this data, that there may be further supportive data that around how we might contemplate the development of the ATL 1102 for other indications. So we have said we're going to be talking to additional parameters, and we have said that the Duchenne's data is important for supporting us moving this drug forward in these other disease indications. The key, though, premise still stands from what we highlighted back in December. That is that in December we saw that the dose that we were testing ATL 1102 at the 25 milligrams a week, the same dose that we have approval for moving ATL 1102 forward in multiple sclerosis, was showing exciting early activity. And so I think that's one of the key deliverables from the data in December, and likely will be another key aspect when we report on this data, is just what we can show about the activity at this low dose. Because being able to that a low dose has two, great advantages. One is that the lower dose you go, the cheaper the cost of therapy, the better the margins that you're going to be able to generate on the drug, but also the safety profile. And so, we know that that's going to be important, not only in Duchenne, but any other inflammatory indication that we move forward on.
Yeah. Just quickly before we go, Mark, I don't know if you can provide comment on this, but would we be looking at a potential capital raise, another capital raise to fund the EU trial? That question has come through as you've been speaking.
Sure. So, the company is moving forward with the planning for the phase 2B clinical trial in Europe. We're having, the interactions with the regulatory authorities. We'll be preparing the clinical trial application. So we have, sufficient funding to undertake all that regulatory activity. When, we do move forward with the actual study, yes, it's likely that we'll need to raise, additional capital. But, that's, a little way down the track now. The company will come forward, with more specific timing on the study. We really do need, though, to hear the European Medicines Agency's thoughts on the study, before we get too specific on the timing. So far, so good. All the indications we have back from the national authorities are showing that we're on the right path. And as I said, we've got sufficient capital to do what we need to do to shore up the regulatory path in Europe. And, when it comes time to look to how we're going to finance the actual study in Europe, well, obviously, we'll be making that known to shareholders at that time.
Thanks, Mark. I'm sure everyone will be following along the journey. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll talk to you soon.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Bye then.
We'll be back after lunch. Take a break, get a coffee, grab some lunch, and we'll see you shortly for the next presentations.